Today is a very special service because we are going to talk about what the next 3 years at Paradox looks like. And to talk, you can be excited about that, the future. It's hopeful, right? Oh, 3 people. We'll get the rest of you by the end of this. We did a 9-year sermon series that ended in September, and we'll talk a little bit about what the next 3 years look like. But to talk about those next 3 years, we have to talk about how we make decisions here at Paradox and where these ideas come from. So to tell you a little bit about this church and what Paradox is, I actually want to go back to the very beginning of this 9-year sermon series, to the book of 1 Corinthians, which we did in August of 2013. If you went to the city of Corinth today in Greece, it would look something like this. It's a coastal town, a lot of travelers in and out of Corinth, and it was there that Paul established a church, and it was the first community that he was really well received, and he ended up staying there for a long time. After he left, the Corinthian church had a few problems in their church, and so Paul wrote them a letter that would eventually become 1 Corinthians. Now, one of the first lines in 1 Corinthians are these words, "To the church of God that is in Corinth." So Paul is writing a letter specifically to a church that has specific problems. And there are many Christians today who believe that 1 Corinthians was written to them, and to that I would say, just go back to verse 2 and remind yourself, this is not about me. We are observers to somebody else's mail. Now, what's really interesting about 1 Corinthians is if you read it closely, it reads like a church manual. In other words, they are having these problems, and Paul says to operate in a healthy way, make sure you do this, but don't do this. Make sure you do that, but don't do that. And to give you an idea of how specific Paul gets, if you look at chapter 8, there is a real debate happening in the Corinthian church. Because in the city of Corinth, people are sacrificing food to idols. And there's this debate in the Corinthian church as to whether or not people who are Christian can eat the food after it has been sacrificed to the idols, and whether or not they can take it into their body or whether it's holy or profane. So Paul writes specifically about that in chapter 8 when he says, we know that no idol in the world really exists. So he says, you know what? God's not threatened by idols. So it doesn't really matter if you eat the food that's been offered to idols already. He then goes on to say, though, it is not everyone, however, who has this knowledge. Therefore, if food is a cause of their falling, I will never eat meat so that I may not cause one of them to fail. So Paul has this specific problem. The Corinthian church has this problem. Paul writes them and says, look, you can eat the meat, or you can eat the food that is offered to idols. It's completely fine. However, if it threatens somebody else's spirituality, just eat it when they're not looking. That's all you have to do. It really bothers them. It's not a big deal. But just when they're around, just be like, yeah, we're not going to eat that right now. That's just one of several examples of what happens in 1 Corinthians. There's ways to talk about speaking in tongues. There's things that people should wear to church and not wear to church. There's ways to administer communion. All of these things are how the Corinthian church is supposed to operate going forward. Now, what's interesting is several hundred years later, a group of Christians came across this letter to the Corinthians and said, oh, let's include this in our Bible. And our Bible is not just any book. Our Bible is holy. And by including a church manual in a book called the Bible, what it is acknowledging is that there is something holy about the way a church organizes itself. There is something about the way that we do processes and understand how this church will work together that is holy in the way that we treat one another. Now, we here at Paradox have a church bylaws. I mean, this stuff is thrilling, as you can tell by the cover art there. Now, I would never describe this as holy, but I would say the process of organizing a community is holy and should be treated with reverence and respect. And so we're going to go a little bit into the bylaws this morning because I know that's what you came to church here for this morning, right? Yeah. Now, if this is your first time here, welcome. We're glad that you're here. You may say to yourself, why did you bring me to church? Why did I show up to church the first time when you're going to talk about your bylaws? To that, I would say, look, I'm really glad you're here. If you've ever wondered what this church is about, this is the perfect worship service to be at. Because we're going to talk all about what this church is about and how it informs what we're going to do for the next 3 years. So I am so glad that you are here on your first time here with us when we're going to talk about what this church is and where we're going. Now, a common question I get about Paradox is this. After I tell people, hey, I'm a pastor of a church, they say, what kind of church is it? I'm like, well, we're a startup. We started in 2016. Shortly thereafter, a question I frequently get is, how many members do you have at Paradox Church? Now, if you know me, you know I don't stress membership a lot. It's very rare I say membership from the stage. But we do have members at this church. Now, a member at Paradox Church is one who supports the mission of Paradox. Our mission is to see and embrace Jesus Christ in all. My hope, our hope, is that this church can help you see Jesus in all that you experience, not just the convenient parts. Another factor of a member is one who finds a spiritual home at Paradox. In other words, whatever it is that you believe, when you arrive at Paradox, there's something about you that relaxes and knows that you are loved and accepted, no matter how you believe what it is that you believe. The third thing that a member has to do to qualify for membership is they have to express a written desire to become a member of Paradox. So that's what it takes to become a member. You do not have to be baptized to be a member at Paradox. You don't have to sign a creed. You don't have to sign a declaration. You just have to follow these three things if you desire to be a member. So with that in mind, when we ask the question, how many members do you have at Paradox Church? The answer is 74. Now, there are other people who find a spiritual home here at Paradox. They just haven't wanted to be a member, and that's more than fine. We have people who are not members teaching kids ministry. We have people leading out that are not members. We don't really delineate between who's a member or who's not in the way that our church operates, with the exception of a few tiny things, which we'll talk about in a second. Now, we were back through these membership books and we realized that some of this is out of date. So starting this year, we are going to begin an annual check-in with membership and just make sure that people want to continue their membership here at Paradox. Now, some people have asked me, should I become a member at Paradox, or when is the time that I should become a member? To that, I would say, if you want to know when it's the right time to become a member at Paradox, it's when you want to participate in the gubernatorial structure of the church. And yes, I was very excited to use gubernatorial. If you want to be part of the governance of the church, become a member. If you don't, and you don't want to know how things happen here, totally fine. You don't have to become a member. It's not a big deal. How members participate in the church is they have three things that they can do. The first is they can vote in elder elections. The second is they can hold the office of elder or trustee, which we'll talk about what those are in a minute. And the third is they can vote on some changes in the bylaws, but not many of them. I can say specifically what those are if you are interested in that, going that far down the road. But those are the three things that members can do at Paradox. Now, there are two boards that are composed of members here at the church that govern the church as it is. The first is the Board of Elders, and the second is the Board of Trustees. The Board of Elders serve 2-year terms, and they are voted and nominated by members of the church and voted in to help guide the spiritual direction of the church. And I have to tell you, I absolutely love all of these people, and it's been an honor and privilege to do church with them, particularly this year, which has just been a year filled with all kinds of excitement, right? And so here's our wonderful elders. There's Christian, Hillary, Sally, Mike, Emily, Thomas, Darius, Abby, Marilee, and I skipped to Jonathan because Jonathan was the guy who said, she said yes, and Jonathan, congratulations. Jonathan is our remote elder. He actually lives in Texas, and he represents all of our online congregations. So, Jonathan, you are part of this church, and you and Sally, we are so excited for both of you, and can't wait to celebrate here in the near future. Now, elders oversee the spiritual health of the church, right? And they oversee decisions about what the church will be. For instance, the LGBT statement, the women's empowerment statement, the anti-racism statement. That all comes from the elders of the church. Now, in addition to elders, we have trustees, and I nominate trustees, and they are confirmed by a vote with the elders, and these trustees oversee the finances and the facilities of Paradox. So we go over a lot of spreadsheets, a lot of budgets, a lot of dollar signs. We go through all of these things, and this group holds the institution financially accountable. In addition, they oversee the facility. So this is the group that decided to buy the building on Lawton Street that we are hoping to move into soon. This is the group that's overseeing the building project. This is what it will hopefully one day look like. And we are doing everything we can to try and get into that building by the end of next year. So hopefully, if everything goes well, that's the earliest time we can see it, and we're hoping that we can pull that off. That's overseen by the Board of Trustees. So we have these two boards, one that oversees spiritual health, one that oversees finances. And the Spiritual Health Board just this year decided that it was important for us to have a Human Resources Advisory Committee. This is brand new. And it is composed of Abby, Hillary, I get to be part of this one, Darius, and Thomas. And this group oversees policies and benefits and wages for staff. And it makes sure that there's a diverse perspective and that all the things that we do as an employer is fair and ultimately generous in what the way we treat our employees. Now, in addition, we also consult with Church HR Network, which are HR pros on standby for us, and we ask them all of our HR questions so we have some professionals in the room whenever we need. In addition, we also have a Personnel Advisory Committee now, which is composed of Abby, Hillary, Darius, and Thomas. And this group oversees personnel issues or staff issues. They also help me become a better manager and also check in with other full-time employees to make sure that they're having a healthy work environment. This group can also work with Church HR Network, and if there was ever a concern that I'd done something egregious or worthy of discipline or termination, that concern would eventually come to this group. They would decide whether or not this had happened, and it would go to the elders. From there, if the elders felt like I did something egregious, it would go to this group, which is called the overseers. Now, the overseers are 5 mentors of mine that have been approved by the elders, and this group has the power to discipline or terminate me. So if the elders say, we think Craig's done something wrong, it would go to this group, and they would go through their different processes, and they would determine whether or not I had done something worthy of discipline or termination. So this is how the church works, and it's composed of a board of all of these wonderful people. Now, I could tell you more about this, but I think it'd be more helpful to invite Darius to come on up, Sanker, one of our elders here at the church. She's been an elder since 2019, and yeah, you can be excited for Darius. And I thought it'd be better if I asked her some questions because these are not things that I make. These are not decisions I make alone. This is decisions that we make as a group. So Darius, let's start with, what do you love about Paradox Church?
Well, what do I love about Paradox Church? It's the people, of course. The various personalities of people that come through those doors. The people that are drawn here, like myself, needed and wanted something to match their new understanding, sometimes of worship. And I'm grateful that we come together with all of these different types of background for community, for spiritual practice, and bagels every week.
Yes, we do love the bagels. And Darius also serves as a volunteer on our hospitality team. Why are you excited about the personnel and HR advisory committees, which are things that people typically don't get that excited about, Darius?
Well, my thoughts are about this committee, both of these committees, actually. I look at how far we've come. And these systems are put in place so that our church body will definitely become better. Just like often I consider Paradox my church family. In your household, you realize that at different times you need to make some adjustments. And I see that having these structures in place will definitely clarify things as we move forward.
That's excellent. So if someone expressed to you a hesitation, because I've heard this kind of through the grapevine or whatever, that Paradox Church is a place where Craig does wherever he wants without accountability, how would you respond to someone that said something like that?
Well, definitely. I would probably first ask them, how do they handle hearsay? Because that matters, right? And then I may suggest a thing or two, but also if they're open to listening, I would say that hasn't been my experience here. What I have found here is that you are full of passion, and Paradox is a place where patience and understanding is important, that we prioritize transparency, vulnerability, flexibility, and forgiveness.
Excellent. And last question, during your time in leadership, how have you seen the church act with integrity?
Well, showing up week after week and vetting the teams and reminding us of what's important, those are also forms of integrity. What I value in the integrity of Paradox is our ability to recall and to recognize why we're here. And our mission to see Jesus in all. And that the fact that as a church body, we do the best that we can to live out that mission. Spending time in prayer, through scriptures, and definitely with each other and our Creator.
Thank you so much, Darius. Thank you to Darius for serving on the Elder Board, HR, and personnel. I tell you this because this idea I ran by for what the next 3 years will be, ran by the Elder Board, which oversees the spiritual health of the church. And this is fully supported by them because we want to make sure everybody comes along on this journey. So 9 years ago, back before Paradox was a church, we were just a young adult group. We started in the book of 1 Corinthians in August of 2013. And it was about here in May of 2014 that people started asking me a question. So, what are we going to do after 9 years? And back in 2014, I had no idea. Because, I had like 8 more years to figure it out. And then the books started going by quicker and quicker. And last September, when we wrapped up, someone asked me, so, what are we going to do after 9 years? I had no idea. I didn't know what to say. I kept thinking like something would show up, and nothing showed up. Until a few conversations happened, and now I can stand in front of you and tell you here in November, for the next 3 years, we are going to do the liturgical calendar and the revised common lectionary. Oh, we got 3 people applauding. Okay, all right. The liturgical calendar, for those of you who don't know, is the seasons of the Christian calendar. They are Advent, Christmas, Epiphany, Lent, Easter, Pentecost, Ordinary Time. And they do not necessarily line up in the same order as the yearly calendar, but you can see what kind of dates they look for the next season ahead of us. Now, each of these seasons represent something different in the Christian journey, and many of these seasons have been practiced by Christians longer than Christians have been reading the Bible. So we are tapping deep into the tradition of Christianity. Advent is the season of hope in the midst of suffering. It is looking forward to the birth of Jesus right before the Christmas season. Christmas then happens, which is the incarnation of God among us. It is a celebratory season. Also, Epiphany is a celebratory season. It's the recognition of God among us, so we celebrate where we have seen God show up in our lives. Lent is a very interesting season that represents the lengthening of days. And the reason Lent is interesting is because it was introduced as a Christian season when Christians in the early church looked around and said, I don't think Jesus is coming back in our lifetime. And so this season was introduced to be honest about one's spirituality and one's self. So it is an honest self-examination in the present. Then there is the Easter, the resurrection of Jesus Christ. It is the resurrection and the transformation that comes when trusting that message. Pentecost is the birth of the church. Not just Paradox, the whole church in the world. And then we come across Ordinary Time, and Ordinary Time needs a PR person because that sounds like the most boring title possible, right? But the way it was explained to me is the reason it's called Ordinary Time is because it's a season. It's the longest season of the Christian year. It's a season where we see the work of God in the ordinary. That's what we celebrate there. So over the next 3 years, our goal is that you will experience these seasons in a way that brings the gospel to life. This starts next week because next week is the first weekend of Advent, and we have a very special service planned for you. It's called In the Stars. It is a lamentation service of remembrance. Advent is a season that while there is hope and anticipation for the future, there is also this sense of grieving and loss because we are experiencing this need for a Savior rather than just hoping for one. So that's what we're doing. We're going to try to bring these seasons to life in the best way possible over the next 3 years. Now, someone could say, but why 3 years? And the answer for that is because of the second part of what we're doing, the Revised Common Lectionary. Now, as you can imagine, trying to lay out verses and sermon plans for all of these seasons to bring these seasons to life would take a lot of work. Fortunately, there's a lot of other Christians who have already done this for us, and they've published a book called the Revised Common Lectionary. And what this book is a set of prescribed readings for us that we will read every Saturday. There's one reading in the Psalms, one in the Hebrew Bible, one in the Gospels, and one in the Epistles, which are the letters of the New Testament. And so every Saturday now, we will have 4 different readings of Scripture, and these readings are supposed to tie together with one theme, and we're going to try our best to bring those themes to life. Now, in addition, this goes beyond just 1 year. It's a 3-year cycle that begins in year A with Matthew, which starts next weekend. Year B then is Mark, and then year C is Luke. And the idea is once you go through the Bible 3 years with this lectionary, you've gone through almost the entire Bible and seen just about every corner of Scripture, which, if you do the math, we just finished a 9-year sermon series going through everything when we did one passage each week. It works out to about the same. Now, you may say to yourself, I've heard of this, or I haven't heard of this. To give you an idea of how widely spread this is a picture of me meeting with the pastors of Redlands. We meet every month. I love these people. They're my team. They're my corner. I absolutely love spending time with these people. They represent all of these denominations and Paradox. And when we go out, we talk about things or whatever, and we talk about what it is that we're facing. And all of them have something in common because all of them except us are doing the lectionary. And the reason I point this out is because more than anything else, these next 3 years are to remind us that we are part of a larger tradition, a larger congregation, and a larger hope. Amen. However, I want to be very clear about something. We will not lose the paradoxiness of this church service. There is this fear when I've talked to people about this plan that we will stop doing pride services. That's not going to happen. Or that we'll stop doing women's empowerment services, or we'll stop singing Olivia Rodrigo in connection with the Thessalonians. We think that we can be more creative going forward because of this structure rather than the other way around. And so I want to assure anyone who's worried when they hear that we're doing what other people are doing, that they may think that we'll start doing every kind of church service that everyone else is doing. So when you look at all of these things in this form, I'm very excited about the future. And you may ask yourself, but where did this idea come from? Well, this started back in July with these overseers who are much more involved in the church than just when I need to be punished. You see, I meet regularly with several of these overseers, whether it's on Zoom or in person, and I was getting coffee with Kim Krogstad, and she was telling me, she's like, Craig, what are you going to do after the 9 years? And I said, well, I don't know. And she's like, you've got to do the lectionary and liturgical calendar. Now, I thought that was cute, and I thought it was nice, but I was like, she's so Lutheran. Like, of course she would want me to do that, right? But a few months later, Maury Jackson got coffee with me. He and Kim do not know each other, and he said, Craig, what are you going to do after the 9-year sermon series? And I said, I don't know. He's like, you've got to do the liturgical calendar and lectionary. And at that point, I started believing in the sign. Because to have these two independently suggest it, who know Paradox, who know me, and think this will be best for our church, I said, I think it's time to do this. Now, I could explain to you the reasons they gave me for why we should do this, or I could just have them explain it themselves. So I have a video, it's about 5 minutes long, of Maury and Kim speaking to all of us about why they suggested this format for our church.
My name is Kim Krogstad, and about 5 months ago, I retired from 38 years of ministry. My last congregation was at First Lutheran here in Redlands.
So my name is Maury Jackson. My relationship with Paradox Church is the role of an overseer, and with Craig, he is a very good friend, a former student, and now in many ways a teacher.
The one time I attended Paradox, it was evident right away that this is a place full of joy and a place where people connect and a place where everyone is welcome, not just welcome, but embraced. Really a Christian community in the best sense of those words.
Why did I strongly recommend Paradox Church to start following the liturgical calendar and the lectionary? Because it has a successful history. It has a good history in Christianity over time. Because it gives the congregation and its members an opportunity to be formed with the larger Christian community. And that formation process and that common identity with other Christians is very helpful for our spirituality, because it keeps the timetable with other Christians in sync. To know that all Christians around the world are reflecting on these same passages around this time helps us to know we're in a larger and deeper tradition.
Well, I recommended that Paradox look at this lectionary for several reasons. I mean, I have to admit it does have its drawbacks. Some of the big stories of the Bible are left out, David and Goliath, Daniel, those kind of stories. But I think, again, it's that sense of the global community. I think it also, since it's just a short text, a pericope, if you will, sometimes it helps us to really drill down, to really take that text on its own terms and drill down. What does that mean? Not just in some universal way, but what does that mean for me in this time and this place? It gives us a variety of texts, as I said, that we might not want to preach on, and it puts us in community with the global church.
If I were to look 3 years down the road, what I would hope to see of the Paradox Church community after following the liturgical calendar, I wouldn't even only say what I hope to see, what I expect to see, what I believe I will see. What I'm pretty certain I will see are disciples of Jesus whose walk with Christ is deepened. There's just no way you can engage with the whole of Scripture and do so thematically without deepening your walk with Christ. So I would expect that to happen. I would also expect the creativity of the congregation to strengthen. I often tell my students in homiletics, the difference between a swampland and a river is a channel, and a channel is a form. We often think if we have no forms, we can be most creative. Actually, the creativity starts, the river begins to dance because it has a channel. It just can't lie and spread like a swampland where you can't farm or drink. And that the liturgical calendar and the lectionary readings give us the form that sparks the creativity.
In the future, by using the lectionary, I think one thing I will see at Paradox is a group of people who see themselves as theologians. Theologians are not just people that sit in an ivory tower and smoke pipes and drink coffee or beer, because I am Lutheran. But theology is faith-seeking understanding. And by this opportunity to drill down on a smaller text and really figure out what is the word of the Lord for me in this text, what is God telling me in this text, I think Paradox will see itself as a community of theologians that are struggling to listen to God, but then not just listen, but then to live out what it is that God has called you to do and to be.
All right, so this is Hillary, our head elder, and she deserves a lot of credit for the way Paradox turns out. You're absolutely fantastic head elder. Hillary, what do you love about Paradox?
I think Paradox has been a place for me to process over the last several years. It feels like whenever there's a traumatic event that happens in society or my personal life, or a great joy that happens in my personal life, getting engaged,
Woo!
Mostly that one. I've just wanted to celebrate it or process it with my community. So Saturday morning when Darius asked me, how was your week? Or when we do celebrations and lamentations, that's space for me to kind of break down those things and just have space.
Excellent. Why are you excited about this new 3-year plan with the lectionary and liturgical calendar?
I am very much looking forward to that same emotional aspect, just taking a different form. I think that it'll grow to be bigger than just celebrations and lamentations, where we kind of go through the celebration and then right after we're like singing the song of celebration and texting our lament at the same time. I think that this spread will let us experience those emotions at greater depth.
I think you're right. If someone expressed a hesitation about the new plan and they worry that Paradox might lose its identity and become like other churches, how would you respond to that?
I think Paradox is so much beyond just that. One time I heard someone describe Paradox as Craig Hadley's church, and Marilee and Thomas both went, no, that is not what Paradox is. This is our church. So I think that when I come in, I still expect to see Marilee and Cheryl and Megan greeting. I still expect to see Kahari and Maddie singing up front. And I still expect to see these little glimpses into people's lives where they share with us from the front. So that's not changing, even though your sermons are a little bit themed differently.
There you go. And when you think about the future of Paradox, what is it that excites you?
That's such a scary question. I have no idea. I've never gone through a liturgical calendar to know what it looks like on the other side. When I look at what Paradox has done for the community of Redlands and the greater Christian church, I think that we have offered language that isn't currently present that's very, very valuable in our 3 statements. So I hope we figure out how to continue this work of social justice, and I hope we see how that turns from just language into actions. And both Kim and Maury said things that really inspire me and make me think that we can do it.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Hillary. Hillary, our head elder. All right, so if someone were to ask me now, what will the topic of your sermon be on Saturday, June 21, 2025? For the first time in my life, I can tell you exactly what verses we're preaching on. It's 1 Kings, Psalms 42 and 43, Galatians 3, Luke and Luke 8. My friends, the biggest advantage of the lectionary is that it allows us to plan ahead. This is why I'm so excited about it, because we can look that far in the future and know exactly what we're doing and how we can try to shape those experiences to try to bring the gospel to life. Now, as Hillary said, this does not just fall on the church staff. This falls on all of us because we want to participate and join hands together as we try to build this church and bring the gospel to life together. There are so many different ways for you to be involved, whether it's through the creative worship planning, whether it's through the music. It's okay if you don't play sax as well as Kahari. None of us can. Whether you're a liturgist, it doesn't matter how old or how young you are. If you can read, you can share this. Even we've had liturgists who can't read be part of it. So we would love for everyone to participate via leading liturgy like Megan and JD have today. We also want a writing team, a team that can help write prayers for us on a weekly basis and also write discussion group questions. We have a fantastic tech team, and we've found that when we introduce people to tech, they're like, oh, I was so intimidated, I didn't know how to work this thing, and it's not nearly as hard as I thought. Not that the tech team isn't incredibly talented. But we would love for you to be a part of the tech team. There's also hospitality, and just if you enjoy and feel like you are welcome here, it's because of our hospitality team, our greeters, and our food. We have an excellent kids program. We're developing our youth and middle school program. We are having all parents lead our kids program, and it's been fantastic. Leslie just led a fantastic lesson today. And we also are wanting to do more with our social activities and make sure that we have fun. I mean, this is cornhole champion Jordan Cattenhorn over here. We want more moments like this. So if you are interested in helping in any way, please let us know. And I'd like to invite up Jasmine Bilbao, who coordinates all of our volunteers and does a great job doing all of these things. So, because you lead all of our volunteers, I have to ask you, what are you excited about with the liturgical calendar and lectionary?
Well, kind of what Maury was saying about like the swamp, and I just feel like the structure of the liturgical calendar and the lectionary just gives me much more space to be creative Thomas was saying it the other day. If you give an architect a wide open field and tell them to build a building, they're kind of limited in their creativity, whereas if they are working with a small space or limited resources, you're forced into this mindset of creativity. And I feel like that is something that we can definitely do here, and making it our own, but still being connected to the greater Christian church.
Now, if someone expressed a hesitation about volunteering and said, I don't want to sign up for something, I'm worried I'll get over-involved, what would you say to them if they expressed hesitation for volunteering?
Well, what I would first say is I know exactly how you feel. I was definitely in that space.
And now you work here. It's a path for everybody.
Yeah. Where you're like, I don't really want to talk to people. I don't have that many skills. And I'm here to tell you that you are definitely more talented than you think that you are. There is a space in volunteering for every single person. And if you aren't really comfortable or you don't have that social energy at 8 o'clock in the morning, you can run our cameras or help out with projection or do some behind the scenes things. There's so many things that you can help with, and we can also work together to help you figure what that is.
How have you seen people thrive in volunteering at Paradox?
Thriving in volunteering at Paradox, I've seen people growing connections that they otherwise wouldn't have had before. This past year in particular, we've been working together with building our team and community in hospitality and tech. And I've just seen all of these relationships blossom, and I have developed greater relationships with people. And I feel like volunteering is the place where you feel like you're a part of something bigger than just yourself. And it's just these connections that I'm so grateful to have, and I've seen so many people have such deep connections.
That's great. Jasmine, you've done a great job. We're so lucky to have you. We would like everyone to reach underneath their seat and pull out this attendance survey. We're going to fill it out together right now. This is not meant to be a guilt trip. We'll talk back and forth about it. There is writing utensils on the back seat in front of you. If you're on the front row, if you just reach around, you can find a pencil or something. Can we get the house lights up just a little bit, Bobby? Is that possible? If not, it's okay. So we'll
You
all,
just put the sides.
We'll write by faith,
Yeah.
not by sight. You're welcome.
Also, if you are an online viewer, Marilee will be commenting the link, so you can also participate in this as well.
So we'll just go through this together up here, and then people can fill out as long as we go. So if you could put your first and last name, Jasmine. What's your first and last name?
My name is Jasmine Billhouse.
That'd be wild if it was something else.
Oh, yeah.
That's great. And then if you could put your phone number, we won't make you say your phone number on the live stream there. And then we want to know, do you mainly attend in person or online? So if you are here and you are mostly an online attender, just let us know. We see no distinction between those, as evidenced by the fact that we have elders that serve that are part of our remote congregation. But if you could fill that out, that'd be great. And if you're still like, I'm pretty new, I'm not sure if I'm mostly online or in person, just check that box as well. And then, would you recommend Paradox to a friend? Yes with no hesitation, yes with some hesitation, no with some hesitation, no with no hesitation. You want to talk about that a little bit? It looks like you're about to say something.
Well, I was going to say yes with no hesitation, not just because I'm employed here, but I also just feel like this is just the perfect church to invite someone to. And personally, my experience is I have talked to a lot of people that attend here that are at different paths or at different spots of their spiritual walk with God and with spirituality. And I feel like this is a place that we welcome questioning.
Yeah, we try to design everything for someone who hasn't been in church before. So anytime you invite somebody that hasn't been to church, or if this is your first time here and you haven't been to church in a while, I hope that you feel like everything that we've done is to make it so that you can jump on board and participate just as much as everybody else. And then if you could let us know how you found Paradox. We have a suspicion where most people find Paradox, but we'd love to have that confirmed by you all.
This is just a fun one.
That is a fun one, too. And then this next one's not meant to be a guilt trip. Are you in a season where you feel like you have the time to be involved in the church? Yes, no, or ask to be in February. It's okay if the answer is no. We are here as much as we can to serve you and make it so that your life is better. So if don't feel bad if you have to check no. That's more than fine. And if it's ask me in February, that's great too. But we would love to have you join, and there are all sorts of options for you to be involved, whether it's getting to know more people, discussion groups, hospitality team, tech team, photography, worship, creative, baptism, liturgist, service participant, or even if you're not sure, just check I'm not sure. And Jasmine, her job is to find a great place for you. So, and then lastly, there's the question, what do you value most at Paradox? So Jasmine, do you want to answer that?
Yeah. For me, it's similar to what Darius has said, but it's truly the people and this space that we get to create together. I have grown so much as a person, and I've also gotten to know so many different people in a way that I have never even thought to connect with them. And that's what's been really valuable to me, is like having these conversations that are hard to do in other places, and doing things like singing all 11 songs of Olivia Rodrigo. Like that doesn't usually happen in church. And so getting to do all these things that shows that we can see Jesus in every single moment of our lives is what's really important to me, what I value.
Amen. Thanks so much, Jasmine. Appreciate it. Thank you all for filling it out as well. We appreciate that. So
we will pick those up right now.
We can pick them after the service.
Okay, never mind.
Or unless you want to pick them now.
No.
We'll do it after the service. So thank you so much for taking the time to fill those out. Just one more section I want to talk about. That is our discussion groups. Now, one of our favorite mantras here at Paradox is that sermons at Paradox are designed to start discussions and not end them. We then started a season of discussion groups way back in the spring of this year, and then we did another one in the fall. We just got to the end of the fall groups. Some groups are continuing to meet. But in this fall season, we had 8 weeks of meetings. We had 8 groups meet. 48 people from Paradox participated in these groups. There were 4 in-person groups and 4 virtual groups. And we are just so excited about how these discussion groups have gone and how they have been received by people. People have really raved about them and participated in them. And in the future, when we make plans with this liturgical calendar, we're planning to go to a 3-month cycle or a 3-month rhythm with our discussion groups. So the next discussion group season will be during Lent and Easter. It will go for 3 months between February and May. Then we'll take 3 months off and then pick it up in ordinary time, which is the longest season. That will be from August to November next year. So we would love for you to mark your calendars or think ahead like, I want to participate in discussion groups, because this is the way to get the most out of your church experience at Paradox. At this point, I'd like to invite up Jason and Beth Brooks, who lead a group that meets every Wednesday, and just have them talk a little bit about their experience. So I think we'll start with Beth. Beth, what do you love about Paradox Church? Oh, yeah, flip that up. There you go. Great.
Sorry. Well, it's difficult to say something that hasn't already been said, or even by me before from up here. But obviously, the people, I love being here every Saturday and worshiping together. But I would have to say the thing that I love the most is the community that is brought together around the core idea of becoming more loving people. And I think that to me, has made this community really unique and a place where I literally feel comfortable inviting anyone that I meet or talk to about spiritual things to Paradox. And that is an experience that has been unique for me, feeling 100% comfortable inviting anybody to this community, because I know that you all will make them feel welcome and celebrated for who they are and where they are in their life. So I really appreciate that about Paradox.
Thank you for sharing that. Jason, how is your church experience before discussion groups different than your experience after discussion groups?
Yeah, I mean, looking forward to seeing people that you have a deep connection with outside of, one morning a week is completely game-changing in terms of coming to church. Just feeling like there's an anticipation of seeing people, feeling like there are people that are looking for you. And I mean, an evidence of that for us has been that a lot of times, our group has met on, Wednesday nights, and still by Saturday morning, we end up standing around in, the foyer talking because we got to catch up on the last, what's happened since Wednesday night. So that's a pretty good sign, I think.
Yeah, excellent. Now, Beth, if someone said to you and expressed hesitation, they said, I don't have time for discussion groups, I'd like to be part of it, but I don't have time, what would you say to someone that might say that?
Well, I'd say that our discussion group is a good example of why a discussion group can be good for anybody, regardless of how tight your schedule is. We have 13 people in our group, and about half the time, maybe, we have about half that many people. There are some people that are part of our group because of their schedule, they've only attended a few times. We have people that are on call for their jobs. We have, people that travel, have other commitments, but, we are still a cohesive group. We still enjoy getting together. We've, got to know each other, and we all really look forward to spending time together and discussing, the sermon or our week.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that. And then Jason, does your discussion group only meet to talk about the Bible and prayer and sermons, or is there something else that happens?
We usually start there. But if somebody really has something on their heart, if it's been a hard week, or if the discussion just diverges into something that's suddenly of interest to all of us, we have no problem going there. And we also get together outside of group, I should say outside of discussion. We get together for social things, sometimes play a game, go out to dinner, and I really love those times because they're no less holy moments in terms of enjoying each other in our relationship.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Jason and Beth, for leading a discussion group and being part of Paradox. So just a brief summary when we talk about 1 Corinthians and organizing a church, what's important to understand is that while Paul had specific things to do in order to help the Corinthian church, there is this core at the letter about what this church is about. It's one of the most famous passages of Scripture. It's 1 Corinthians 13, and it's often referred to as the love chapter. And there are all these disagreements that happen in the church about speaking in tongues or food sacrificed to idols or what people should wear. And Paul says, here's the rules for how we're going to go going forward, but let's not get too focused on the rules, because the whole reason I'm writing these organizational words is so that we might become more loving people. So I want to close with the words of 1 Corinthians 13 and imagine that this is why we have all these church structures and programs, is so that we can experience love in a transformational way, in the same way that Paul hoped that the Corinthian church would experience love in a transformational way. So to this, we'll read 1 Corinthians 13. Paul writes, "If I speak in the tongues of mortals and of angels, but do not have love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. And if I have prophetic powers and understood all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have all faith so as to remove mountains, but I do not have love, then I am nothing. If I give away all of my possessions, and if I hand over my body so that I may boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing. Love is patient. Love is kind. Love is not envious or boastful or arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice in wrongdoing, but rejoices in the truth. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never ends. But as for prophecies, they will come to an end. As for tongues, they will cease. As for knowledge, it will come to an end. For we know only in part, and we prophesy only in part. And when the complete comes, the partial will come to an end. When I was a child, I spoke like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. But when I became an adult, I put an end to childish ways. For now we see in a mirror dimly, but then we will see face to face. Now I know only in part, then I will know fully, even as I have been fully known. And now faith, hope, and love abide, these three, and the greatest of these is love. Amen.